The day Nolan Voss fired me, he slid a printed screenshot of my LinkedIn across his desk like it was evidence in a murder trial. I'd applied to one job. On a Tuesday night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold next to me. And somehow, that single click was the thing that ended 15 years. My name is Wade Holloway. I'm 54 years old, and I was director of client strategy at Harlan & Voss until I wasn't. Let me back up. I joined Harlan & Voss when I was 39, not a kid chasing his first real job, a grown man who knew what he was walking into and chose it anyway. The firm had a reputation for doing serious work with serious clients, and I wanted in. So I came in, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. Within 3 years, I had redesigned the entire client retention system from scratch. I built the renewal architecture, the timelines, the performance benchmarks, the escalation protocols. I personally negotiated the long-term contracts with our 12 largest accounts, and I mentored 3 full rounds of account managers, most of whom now hold titles above mine. That last part used to bother me more than I let on. The system I built was responsible for roughly 60% of the firm's annual revenue. Not a rough estimate, that number came from the CFO's own quarterly reports. Miles Foster, our CFO, had pushed for my raise more than once. He knew what my work was worth. The problem was, Nolan Voss was the one making that call, and Nolan had a different way of handling it. Every year, same office, same view of the Dallas skyline, same folded hands on the desk. Wade, let's revisit compensation next quarter, for 15 years. I never flipped the desk, never raised my voice. I learned early on that staying calm bothers men like Nolan more than anger ever could, so I stayed calm. I asked the same question every time. Is there an actual timeline this year? And every year he gave me some version of the same answer. Loyalty builds legacy. Company culture, we're all tightening belts together. The year he said that last one, the board had just approved executive bonuses tied directly to the client retention growth my framework produced. My client relationships, my 15 years of work. My salary stayed exactly where it was. I walked out of that meeting the same way I always did, back straight, jaw tight, nothing on my face. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table. I thought about it for about an hour. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up my resume, which I'd kept current for years, just in case, and went to the careers page of Apex Strategy Group, the largest competitor in our sector. One application, one click, no music playing, no big moment. I wasn't asking for a raise anymore. I was asking for a way out. 3 days later, Nolan's assistant called me into his office. He wasn't smiling. The printed screenshot was already on the desk when I walked in. My LinkedIn profile. A recruiter's comment on one of my posts highlighted in yellow marker like he'd stayed up doing homework. So it's true, he said. You've been interviewing on my own time, on my own laptop. His jaw tightened. You chose disloyalty, Wade. That word. I'd heard him use it before, usually when someone pushed back on a decision he'd already made. Loyalty, in Nolan's vocabulary, meant compliance. It meant not asking questions. It meant sitting across from him every year and nodding while he told you next quarter, like it was a gift. I chose options, I said. He leaned back, folded his hands. I don't keep men who hedge their bets. That was it. 15 years of building the revenue engine that kept his firm running, and it came down to that sentence. So what are you saying? I asked. I already knew. I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately. No discussion, no severance offer, just a badge deactivation notice and a call down to the front desk. I picked up my jacket from the chair. 2 security guards appeared at the door. I'd never learned their names, which felt strange in that moment, and walked me through the main floor, past the bullpen I had helped organize, past account managers I had trained from their first week, past people who looked at the floor when I walked by because they didn't know what else to do. Nolan watched from behind the glass, arms crossed. The look of a man who believed he had just handled something. He thought he'd taught me a lesson about loyalty. What he didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that 8 years earlier, when I was building out the long-term contract templates for our enterprise accounts, I had included a clause. Section 12. Key person continuity. If the strategic lead overseeing the account departed the firm, the client reserved the right to review, renegotiate, or terminate the agreement within 30 days. I wrote it as client protection, standard risk management language. Nobody questioned it at the time because nobody thought much about it. I never imagined I'd be the one to trigger it. That night, Miles texted me. Did he actually walk you out? I typed back. In front of the whole floor, a long pause. Then, he has no idea what's in those contracts, does he? No, he didn't. The next morning, I didn't sleep in. I was up at 6, coffee made, sitting at the same kitchen table where I'd submitted that application 4 days earlier. I wasn't panicking. That surprised me a little. 15 years at one place, walked out by security in front of your entire team. Most people would be on the phone with a lawyer by sunrise, but I felt something closer to clarity than fear. Like a pressure I'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. My phone buzzed around 8. Miles again. 3 of the major accounts requested urgent meetings this morning. Not with Nolan, with the board directly. I read it twice, set the phone down, picked it up again. Which 3? I typed back. He sent the names. I knew those accounts better than anyone in that building. I had personally negotiated every renewal. I knew the contact names, the internal champions, the specific language each client cared about, and I knew exactly what was sitting in Section 12 of each of their contracts. The clause wasn't designed to be a weapon. I want to be clear about that. When I wrote it, I was thinking about client risk. What happens if the firm restructures? If key people get reassigned? If the strategic continuity breaks down? Clients signing 3- and 5-year agreements want assurance that the person who understands their business is actually going to be there. So I gave them a contractual right to reassess if that person left. I just never thought that person would be me, walking out the front door with a security escort. By midday, the first formal notice arrived at Harlan & Voss. One of the $12 million accounts had issued written intent to initiate contractual reassessment under the continuity clause. Their legal team wasn't emotional about it. They weren't punishing anyone. They were simply exercising a right that was written into the agreement they had signed. That's the thing about systems built on structure rather than relationships. They don't care about office politics. They just execute. Miles called me that afternoon. He kept his voice neutral, like he was reading from a report. Nolan addressed the board this morning, he said. Told them it was noise. Said transitions happen. What did the board say? I told them revenue was down 18% in 72 hours. A pause. Nolan called it temporary headwinds. I didn't respond to that. He genuinely doesn't understand what you built, Miles said. He thinks the clients are loyal to the firm. He doesn't get that they were loyal to the system and the system had your name on it. I thanked him and got off the phone. I had somewhere to be. Apex Strategy Group's offices were on the 31st floor of a building downtown, clean lines, natural light, none of the glass office and skyline theater that Harlan & Voss favored. My first day was quiet in the best possible way. No one pulled me into a politics briefing. No one warned me about which executives to avoid. I was shown my office, introduced to my team, and left to work. On my second morning, CEO Adrian Cole stopped by my door. He didn't make it a big moment. Just leaned against the frame, coffee in hand, and said, "We don't chase talent. Talent walks in." Then he moved on. That was it. No speech. No performance review of my career history. Just a man who had already made up his mind and didn't feel the need to explain it. By Wednesday, my phone was getting busy. Former clients, people I had worked with for years, some for over a decade, were reaching out. The messages were professional, measured. Heard about the transition. Are you available to advise? I kept every response the same. I'm happy to discuss opportunities through Apex Strategy Group. Nothing more. No winking. No back-channel conversations, just a clean, direct answer. I didn't need to do anything else. The clause was already running its course. Meanwhile, Nolan had started talking, word filtered back through industry contacts. He was suggesting I had violated confidentiality agreements, that I was actively recruiting his clients away. It was the move I expected. When you can't defend the decision, attack the person who left. The problem was, his version of events had a paper trail problem. Contracts have timestamps, emails have headers, and every communication between me and those clients had been initiated by them, not me. I had not made a single outreach call. I had not sent a single message first. On Thursday afternoon, one of the largest accounts sent a formal written statement to both Harlan & Voss and Apex Strategy Group. Their legal team kept it short. 16 words. He did not solicit us. We initiated contact. Apex's legal team filed it without comment. Adrian saw it, nodded once, and said, "Good. Facts are efficient." Then he walked back to his office. I went back to my desk and finished the onboarding documentation for 2 new accounts that had come in completely unsolicited since my first week started. By Friday, the second formal notice reached the Harlan and Voss board. Another major contract had triggered its reassessment window. Their outside counsel was now involved. An internal leadership review had been quietly initiated. They were pulling email archives, contract records, board minutes. Miles texted me that evening. They're going through everything. Nolan told the board the client exits were coordinated. Nobody in that room believed him. I read the message, set my phone face down on the counter, and made dinner. The system I built was doing exactly what I designed it to do. I didn't need to be in that building. I didn't need to be on any of those calls. I just needed to stay out of the way and let the structure work. Some things you build to last. Turns out, that works both ways. The second week, things inside Harlan and Voss moved faster than I expected. Miles called me Monday morning earlier than usual. He kept his voice low, like he was stepping away from something. Nolan opened the board meeting with temporary economic headwinds and minor team misalignment, he said. How'd that land? I interrupted him on the second slide. Told them revenue was down 18% in 72 hours and that 2 more accounts had entered reassessment windows. He called it volatility. I called it structural failure. Miles paused. He did not appreciate that. Nolan's response was predictable. By Tuesday, 2 mid-level managers had been let go, people who had nothing to do with contract strategy, client retention, or anything that actually mattered in this situation. It was the oldest move in the book. When you can't fix the problem, find someone visible to blame and make a show of it. One of the senior directors texted me that afternoon. He just fired Paulson and Greer. Everyone knows it's theater. I didn't respond, not my building anymore. What I did do was finish the transition framework for a new enterprise account at Apex, schedule 2 onboarding calls for the following week, and approve a budget expansion that Adrian had been waiting on. Clean work. Focused work. The kind of work I hadn't been able to do at Harlan and Voss in years because I was always too busy defending my own position. By Wednesday, Miles called again. 4 accounts are now in active review, he said. 4. Board wants projected revenue impact if 2 more trigger the clause. The number isn't pretty. I didn't ask what the number was. It wasn't my problem to solve. Thursday brought resignations. 2 senior directors, separate letters same day. Both cited leadership instability and loss of strategic confidence. Their exits were quiet and professional, which somehow made it worse for Nolan than if they'd gone out swinging. Quiet departures from senior people don't read as personal. They read as institutional. They tell investors and board members that people with real information and real options have decided to leave. That's a different message entirely. My phone rang Friday afternoon. I was in the middle of reviewing a proposal when Nolan's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. He called again 2 minutes later. Then again. On the 4th attempt, I stepped into the hallway outside my office and picked up. His voice was different. The boardroom authority was gone. What was left sounded like a man who had spent the week realizing how badly he'd miscalculated. Wade, just my name, first. Like he was testing whether I'd hang up. I waited. Let's fix this, he said. Come back. We'll discuss compensation. Real compensation this time. Significant adjustment. Adjustment, not apology. Not any acknowledgement of 15 years. Just a number to be negotiated, same as always, except now he was the one making the call instead of me. You had 15 years, I said. Silence. This isn't about the past, he pushed. The board is overreacting. I can stabilize this. Come back and we'll put together a package, whatever you need. I'm not available, I said, and I'm not interested. His tone shifted. The strain dropped away and the old Nolan came back, the one who folded his hands and talked about legacy. You're making a mistake. Everything you built here. No, I said. I built it, period. He exhaled hard through the phone. You're going to let the whole company suffer because of your pride. I almost laughed at that. The man who had told me next quarter for 15 consecutive years was asking me about pride. You terminated me, I said. Effective immediately. You made that call, Nolan? I didn't. A long pause. I don't negotiate under pressure, I added. You actually taught me that. I ended the call and walked back into my office. Adrian was passing in the hallway, caught my eye briefly and kept moving. He didn't ask. Leaders who trust you don't need a debrief after every phone call. The following morning, the market answered in a way that no board meeting or press statement could undo. An investment fund that had been in late-stage discussions with Harlan and Voss released a brief public notice. Negotiations paused pending resolution of executive risk concerns. Not market conditions, not sector volatility, executive risk. By noon, it had run through 3 industry newsletters. By mid-afternoon, Miles texted, "Fund froze the capital talks. Emergency board session called for tomorrow." I forwarded 3 finalized proposals to Adrian's office and blocked time for a strategy session the following week. That was my afternoon. Harlan and Voss stock dropped 12% in 3 days. Nolan held a closed investor call. I heard about it secondhand, where he apparently used the word recalibration 4 times in 20 minutes. By Friday, the stock had fallen another 7 points. Total drop, 19% in under 2 weeks. 19% isn't fluctuation, that's a signal. Investors read it the same way they read everything else, not emotionally, just as information. And the information was saying that the people running this firm had made a significant error in judgment, and that error was now sitting on the balance sheet. A former colleague sent me a screenshot late Friday evening. An internal email from Nolan, sent the morning after my termination, forwarded now to half the senior floor. 2 words in the relevant line, "Wade was replaceable." I read it once, closed the screenshot. He had believed that. He had genuinely believed that the system would keep running, because the system existed, without understanding that the system existed because I had built it, maintained it, and personally held together the client relationships that made it function. He confused the infrastructure with the architect. That's a costly mistake. The board was about to find out exactly how costly. The emergency board meeting happened on a Tuesday. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Miles gave me a summary afterward. The kind of summary you give someone when you want them to understand exactly what happened without embellishing it. Nolan opened the meeting the way he always opened difficult conversations, by reframing the problem. He called the client exits coordinated. He used the word sabotage. He implied that former employees had colluded with competitors to damage the firm's standing. Board Chair Sylvia Drummond let him finish. She rarely interrupted people. She didn't need to. When Nolan was done, she set down her pen and said, "No, Nolan, this is consequence. 2 words, that was all." The financial summaries were presented, risk exposure projections, a legal analysis of executive decision-making during active contract cycles, specifically, the decision to terminate the firm's primary strategic lead while 4 major accounts were inside open renewal windows. The board wasn't looking at this as a betrayal story. They were looking at it as a governance failure. Nolan tried one more time. "Leadership requires decisive action." Sylvia answered without hesitating, "Leadership requires judgment." The vote wasn't dramatic, no raised voices, no walkouts. Just the formal process running its course, motions made, seconds given, hands raised, minutes recorded. Nolan Voss was removed as CEO of Harlan and Voss. Effective immediately, the public statement released that afternoon was exactly 3 sentences. Leadership transition, interim oversight, commitment to stability. In corporate language, that translates cleanly. Exit under pressure, no severance narrative, no victory lap for anyone. I was at my desk at Apex when the news alert came through. I read it once, then closed the tab and went back to the proposal I was working on. Miles texted shortly after, "It's done." I typed back, "Understood." That evening, one final message arrived. Nolan's personal email address, a subject line left blank. The body of the email had 2 words, "You ruined me." No reflection, no ownership. Just displacement, the same instinct that had driven every bad decision he'd made in the past month, looking outward for someone to hand the bill to. I stared at it for a moment. Then I closed the window and went to make dinner. I hadn't ruined him. He had simply run out of road on a path he'd been building for years. I just happened to be the moment the pavement ended. There's a footnote to all of this that I think matters. About 3 weeks after Nolan was removed, Perry Voss gave a statement to an industry publication. Perry was 88, the firm's original founder, Nolan's father, mostly retired, mostly quiet for the better part of a decade. He didn't hold press conferences.
He didn't do interviews. So when his name showed up in print, people paid attention. The statement was short.
He said he was deeply concerned about recent leadership decisions and their impact on the firm's legacy. When your own father says that publicly, there's nothing left to rehabilitate. The story is over. I didn't reach out to Perry. I didn't comment when journalists called. I had nothing to add that the numbers hadn't already said more clearly than I could. A year passed. Apex promoted me to partner. Equity stake, strategic oversight, a real seat at the table where decisions actually get made. No more annual meetings where someone across the desk tells me next quarter while collecting bonuses built on my work. No more glass offices, no more loyalty speeches. The first morning I came in as partner, Adrian shook my hand and said, "Nothing changes about how you work." That's the point. Then he walked back to his office and we both got on with the day. That was it. No ceremony, no speech. Just respect that moved at the same speed as the work. A few months into the new role, I was running a strategy session with a group of executives, some senior, some newer to their positions. The kind of mixed room where the dynamic is always a little careful. At the end of the session, one of the younger ones asked, almost offhand, "What's your take on corporate loyalty?" The room got quiet. I think people expected me to be careful with the answer. I wasn't. Loyalty isn't owed, I said. It's earned. The moment a company stops earning it, they don't get to keep demanding it. Nobody laughed. Nobody pushed back. They nodded, the kind of nod that means the person has been thinking about the same thing and just hadn't heard it said out loud yet. That's the difference between Apex and Harlan and Voss. At Harlan and Voss, loyalty was something they expected you to bring through the door and leave on the desk every morning, unconditionally, regardless of what they gave back. At Apex, it's a two-way account. You put something in, they put something in. The balance stays honest. Nolan's reputation never recovered, not the way you hope things recover when you're still young enough to rebuild. His name carries a specific kind of weight now in investor circles in Dallas, the kind that makes people pause before they commit to anything. That's not my doing. It's just what happens when the record is clear and the math is public. I don't bring it up. I don't reference it in meetings. I don't tell this story at dinner parties. I'm telling it now because I think there are men out there sitting in the same chair I sat in for 15 years, hearing the same next quarter from someone behind a bigger desk, and convincing themselves that patience is the same thing as strategy. It isn't. Patience is a virtue, but patience without a line in the sand is just waiting with better posture. I built the system. I knew what it was worth. And the day I stopped asking permission to be compensated fairly, the day I quietly opened that laptop and made one click, was the day I stopped being an employee who hoped things would change and started being a man who decided they would. Document your value, understand your contracts, and know the difference between loyalty and self-neglect. Those aren't the same thing. They never were. A man who builds the engine doesn't owe the driver his silence, and the moment you accept that, everything changes. Walk away clean. Build forward hard and let the work speak the verdict that no argument ever could.